Coming off a trip to the NBA Finals and having one of the best and most deep teams in the entire league, the Dallas Mavericks are set to have a great season again. After all, they were 5th in the West with a 50-32 record last season, and again, finally got over the hump to make the NBA Finals. In reality though, they were even better than that record might tell you. They were 21-9 after the trade deadline, the 3rd best record in the entire league, and that was really with their real team. After adding Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, they became a lot more complete. Not only were they bigger, but they are simply a lot more well-rounded, and their offensive and defensive rating showed that too. They were top 7 in both offensive and defensive rating after the trade deadline, one of the only teams in the entire league to do that. And no matter what way you look at it, they were obviously very good. But even apart from Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, they didn't have much offensive creation. PJ Washington could occasionally create his own shot, but that was pretty much it for their primary rotation. Jaden Hardy might have potential, but he was not quite there yet last season, and they didn't really fully trust him to that self-creation. And they could really benefit from having 1 or 2 more shot creators, or guys that simply demand attention when they move off the ball. And well, that's exactly what they went out and got. With that being Klay Thompson, pretty safe to say they addressed that problem. They signed one of the best 3-point shooters and most dangerous off-ball players in NBA history. And you know, maybe not quite the player that he once was, not prime Klay Thompson anymore, but still a very good player and a dangerous pairing with Luka and Kyrie Irving. But with that being said, how much better did the Mavs actually become? And what did they both gain and lose in their team identity? We'll break it all down. But before we get too far into it, if you love NBA content and in-depth content full of stats and team breakdowns, then don't forget to drop a like, hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss out when I upload a video. But without further ado, let's dive right into it. And I think we'll begin by talking about who they lost in their team. And for number 1, they did happen to lose Derrick Jones Jr., a big piece of their team and definitely a big piece of their team defense. And after joining the LA Clippers, they will have to replace him. But what they did lose with him, arguably their best perimeter defender, and not to mention a very switchable defender too. Could defend everything 1 through 3 and even 1 through 4 at times, so definitely a very versatile and good defender for their team. And not only that, but a member of their starting lineup and a very durable one too. Played in nearly 80 games for them plus 22 more playoff games. Never missed a playoff game for them and barely missed any regular season time. And he was even better in the postseason than he was during the regular season. He improved in nearly every single stat category, being points per game, rebounds per game, and 3-point shooting too, with that being the big one, taking a jump from 34.3% from 3 all the way up to 36.9% from 3. And that's pretty rare for a role player to do during the postseason. Oftentimes they go down or maybe stay the same, not usually take a big jump, and especially not for a fairly average 3-point shooter. So definitely a big loss with Derrick Jones Jr. in my opinion, and they will have to replace him, which they might have done, and we'll get to that in a bit. But for loss number 2, they did lose Josh Green, another 3-and-D or kind of sporadic 3-and-D wing player for their team, and they traded him to the Charlotte Hornets. And what they did lose with him was a fairly good 3-point shooter and again a fairly sporadic but good defender. He shot 39.3% from 3 during the past 2 years combined. Great catch and shoot guy, really quick trigger, and all around a good kick out guy for Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So that will be a little bit of a loss for them. And again, he could be a good defender when he was locked in, but he still would tend to make the same mistakes over and over. Being a bit foul prone for a wing, averaging about 4 of them per 36 minutes, and again kind of kept making the same mistakes over and over. And with him not really showing any improvement, it might have been the right move to trade him. After all, they did sign him to a 3-year, $41 million deal, and for a role player, that's a lot of money. With him not really looking like he was worth it again, or maybe would never achieve that potential, I think it was the right move. They're trying to be a win-now team and can't really afford to develop a young player that kept on making the same mistakes. I like Josh Green, and I think Charlotte will be a good place for him to maybe grow into his overall game, but I think I would have to agree with them trading him. Moving on though, for loss number 3, they traded away Tim Hardaway Jr., a guy that had been with their team for about half a decade, but one that was definitely aging and declining with their team as well. Was a career 14-point per game scoring option that could be a spark plug off their bench, had plenty of 30-plus point games for their team, and they definitely will miss that at times. And not only that, but a really high volume 3-point shooter, attempted over 7 of them per game during his time with their team, and that's quite a bit, like in the top 5% of the entire league. And then with him converting 37.5% of them, that's a pretty good average to have out. There's not many guys that can do that, and even with him being fairly average to even below average on defense, again, there's not many guys that can both take that many threes and make them at that rate. But with them not really being able to trust him in big moments, even kind of having to bench him throughout the entire postseason, it definitely was the right move to move on from him if you ask me. Between the big contract, albeit an expiring contract, and then with him declining, I think they did make the right choice. And then with them trading him, they did free up that money to sign other guys too. And with that being said, the first big addition they made did happen to be Klay Thompson. I referred to it before, but he'll definitely be a direct replacement and upgrade over Tim Hardaway Jr., both a higher volume and more efficient 3-point shooter. He shot nearly 39% from 3 last season, even in a quote-unquote down year, so yeah, pretty damn good. And not to mention how many he takes per game, about 9 of them per game, and that's only second to Steph Curry in regard to guys that both took that many and made over 30% of their threes last season. So pretty good company to be in. And not only that, but still can be a good scoring option too. I mean, I know we tend to act like Klay Thompson completely fell off and is completely washed up at this point, but that's simply not true. The guy still puts up about 18 points per game and can get just as, if not even more hot than practically any shooter in the NBA. So definitely not a downgrade in that regard, and in my opinion a major upgrade for their team. A lead movement shooter that can absolutely thrive while playing with ball dominant players, which Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving definitely do categorize as. Klay doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective, never did, never will, and that's a great player to pair with Luka and Kyrie Irving. You know, maybe not the defender that he once was, which we do need to factor in on defense, especially with Luka and Kyrie not being great defenders themselves, but that fit on offense would be great, and I think you would have a hard time denying that. Between the catch and shoot opportunities, and then with Klay Thompson always moving off the ball and freeing up their offense, I think that's going to work really well. Moving on though, for addition number 2, they signed Naji Marshall to a 3-year, $27 million deal. And although the casual fan might have scoffed or even laughed at it, I think it was a very good and underrated addition for their team. Kind of an upgrade over the Grant Williams signing that didn't go well for their team last season. Naji Marshall is both a fairly young and really up-and-coming 3-and-D wing. Definitely not a all-star or anything like that, but I think he could be a starting level 3-and-D wing in the NBA. Probably will be playing a bench role for them this season, but he can fill that really well. He kind of went unknown and really underappreciated while doing it, but he filled that role for about half a decade during the first 4 years of his career back in New Orleans, and I think that he can do it again in Dallas. Up until this point, primarily known for being a defender, an athletic 6'7" switchable wing defender, and definitely being willing to do the hard work on defense that other guys might not want to do, whether it's diving for a loose ball, taking on the toughest matchup, fighting for a defensive rebound, or whatever it might be. Naji Marshall is more than willing to do it, and they definitely did need that too, especially after losing Derrick Jones. In my opinion, probably an overall upgrade over Derrick Jones, not really on defense, probably a little bit below what Derrick Jones was for them, which was a really good wing defender, but even Naji Marshall is pretty damn good, albeit not an upgrade on defense, but in my opinion definitely one on offense. Both a better scoring option, a better 3-point shooter, and all around a more versatile offensive player. Naji Marshall again can both be a good 3-point shooter. He shot a career high 39% from 3 last season, and 42% on corner threes at that. But then can actually create his own shot when needed to, can get to the rim, pull up from the mid-range, and all around be a little bit more self-creative and self-imposed than Derrick Jones was with their team. So that definitely can help if they're ever missing Luka Doncic and or Kyrie Irving. That's when that talent can actually come into effect. Naji Marshall can get to the rim, very athletic to finish above the rim, and then again can create his own shot. So all around great addition for their team, and I really like it too. But then for addition number 3, they picked up Quentin Grimes through a trade. And in my opinion, it was really weird that New York gave up on him. After having a really good season for their team back in 2022-23, he kind of fell off and even became an afterthought within their rotation. Sure, they have a lot of good wing depth, but I think Quentin Grimes is going to help them and definitely could help the Dallas Mavericks. Only 24 years old and with a really good 3-and-D skill set, a career 37.1% 3-point shooter already, and not to mention a good defender while doing it. and like I mentioned before, had a productive year with the Knicks to show for it back in 2022-23, averaging 11.3 points per game, 3.2 rebounds per game, shooting 47% from the field, and then over 38% from 3 on over 5 attempts per game. Pretty damn good, and especially for a 22-year-old at that time. So in my opinion, great pickup for their team and a really good long-term addition for their team potentially too. But then finally for addition number 4, and their final addition of the offseason, or primary one anyway, they picked up Spencer Dinwiddie, or rather re-added him to their team. And when he was on their team, he played really well. In fact, the best stretch of his entire career. During that 85-game stretch with their team, he averaged about 17 points per game, 4.5 assists per game, over 40% from 3, and nearly 50% on corner threes. So yeah, safe to say they fit in pretty well with their team. They probably didn't want to trade him, but when you could get Kyrie Irving, I think you gotta be willing to trade Spencer Dinwiddie. Luckily for them though, they got Dinwiddie back on a minimum contract, so you really can't argue against that. Now, he will be filling a smaller role for their team this time around, filling a backup point guard and spark plug off the bench kind of role for their team, but all around a great depth piece, a proven fit with Luka Doncic, and again, insane value for a veteran minimum contract, so you really can't complain about it. And for my overall thoughts on their team, I don't know how you can really argue against the Mavericks being a top 3 team in the West, especially with Minnesota potentially getting worse, and even Denver as well. I think they're a great bet to make it back to the NBA Finals, health permitting anyway, but no matter what, they're going to be tough. They're still fairly young and, in my opinion, got even a little bit better. So definitely a dangerous team to watch out for. With that being said though, what do you guys think? How do you feel about the outlook for the Dallas Mavericks entering this season? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one, and if you enjoyed the video, then don't forget to drop a like, hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and turn on notifications so you never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.